We have been studying Egypt for 200 years. We have excavated, translated, catalogued. Our museums are full of its objects. Our books are full of its stories. Our documentaries are full of its wonders. And yet, we cannot explain how the pyramids were built. We cannot explain the erosion on the Sphinx. We cannot explain the 70-ton granite boxes of Saqqara. We cannot explain why no mummy was ever found in the pyramids of Giza. And we cannot explain why the Egyptians themselves wrote that there were rulers before them for 13,000 years. The Egypt we were taught is the easy answer. This documentary is the difficult question. Come with us. Because the Egypt you are about to see is not in the history books. It is in the stone, in the rock, in the texts that Egyptian scribes wrote and that modern academia prefers to ignore. Let's begin where it all began, not in 3100 BC, much earlier. Beneath the sands of Egypt there is a labyrinth, tunnels carved into solid rock, over 400 meters long, dark, silent, cold, and inside those tunnels there are boxes, 24 granite boxes. Each one weighs 70 tons. The lid alone weighs 30. To give you a sense of what 70 tons means, that's the weight of 10 adult African elephants in a single box. These boxes were cut with precision to fractions of a millimeter. The interior surfaces are polished like mirrors. The angles are perfectly 90 degrees. The lids fit so precisely that you cannot slide even a sheet of paper between the lid and the body of the box. The official explanation? They were sarcophagi for sacred bulls. But there's a massive problem with that explanation. Most of them were empty when found. No bull remains, no bones, absolutely nothing inside. And the technology needed to create these boxes with that precision, it shouldn't have existed in ancient Egypt. It simply shouldn't have. But here's something even more disturbing than the boxes themselves. The Egyptians left a record of who made them. It's in their sacred texts, carved in stone, written on papyrus. And what they wrote completely contradicts everything official history tells us about Egypt. Because before the pharaohs, long before, there were others. Others who ruled this land for more than 13,000 years. Who were these beings? Stay until the end, because the answer will change forever the way you see Egypt. The official history of Egypt begins around 3100 BC with Pharaoh Narmer, the unification, the first dynasties. That's the narrative in every textbook. It's what they taught you in school. But the Egyptians themselves told a completely different story, a story that begins much earlier than Narmer. And we have proof of this in two extraordinary documents that modern archaeologists prefer to treat as myth, even though the Egyptians clearly treated them as history. The first document, the Palermo stone. It's a fragment of black basalt, part of a larger stele, a monumental stone slab that listed all the kings of Egypt from the very beginning of time. This stone dates from the 5th dynasty of Egypt, around 2400 BC. It's on display today at the Archaeological Museum of Palermo, Italy, hence the name. The stone lists historical pharaohs we know, but before them, it lists something completely different, pre-dynastic rulers. First, the Neteru, the gods. Ta, Ra, Shu, Geb, Osiris, Set, Horus. The stone lists the reigns of these divine beings, each ruling for hundreds or even thousands of years. After the gods comes another group, the Shemsu Hor, followers of Horus. They weren't gods, but they weren't ordinary humans either. They were something in between. The second document, the Turin Papyrus. This one is even more detailed and more disturbing. The Turin Papyrus was written during the reign of Ramesses II, around 1250 BC. It's a complete list of all rulers of Egypt from the creation of the world up to that point. The papyrus is damaged and fragmented, but what survived is extraordinary. It divides Egyptian history into clearly defined eras. First, the age of the gods, the Neteru ruling directly, then the age of the Shemsu Hor. And the Turin Papyrus gives a specific number for the reign of the Shemsu Hor, 13,120 years, 13,420 years, before Narmer, before the pyramids. before everything we know as Egyptian civilization. Now, I need you to think critically about this for a moment. Egyptian scribes were some of the most meticulous professionals in all of ancient history. They recorded everything with obsessive precision. Grain records, taxes, battles, royal births and deaths, all documented with extraordinary rigor. These same scribes wrote 13,120 years of previous rulers. Why would they invent such a specific number? 13,420 is not a round number. It's not symbolic. It's exactly the kind of number you write down when you're recording real facts. Modern academia says it's myth, it's symbolic. The Egyptians were being poetic, but the Egyptians knew how to distinguish between myth and history. They had different words and different formats for each. The Turin Papyrus is a king list, not a religious text, not an allegory. It's history. At least, that's what the Egyptian scribes believed they were recording. So the question academia avoids asking is, what if they were right? Let's understand who the Shemsu Hor were, because this is crucial for what comes next. The Egyptian texts are clear about one thing. The Shemsu Hor were not the Neteru, the gods. The gods came first. They ruled Egypt directly. Then came the Shemsu Hor as a second layer, intermediaries between the divine and the human. Followers of Horus is the literal translation, but the title carries deeper implications than simply follower. In ancient Egyptian, Shemsu means something closer to companion or guardian. Not a servant is an active guardian of something precious. Guardian of what? Of knowledge. There are three major interpretations of who the Shemsu Hor actually were. The conventional academic interpretation. The Shemsu Hor were the pre-dynastic priestly elite, religious and political leaders who governed Egypt before unification. The 13,420 years are mythical exaggeration. In reality, just a few centuries of tribal leaders. Seems reasonable, except for one detail this explanation can't resolve. Egyptian priests had knowledge that shouldn't have existed in that historical period. Extremely precise astronomy, advanced medicine, architecture that still impresses modern engineers. If the Shemsu Hor were merely tribal leaders spanning a few centuries, where did that knowledge come from? The hybrid interpretation. The Shemsu Hor were descendants of the Neteru, the product of a crossing between the divine and the human, like the Nephilim of the Hebrew tradition, sons of God with human women, as described in the book of Genesis, like the demigods of Greek mythology, Hercules, Achilles, Perseus, with powers beyond human but still mortal. Beings with something different in their blood, with capabilities ordinary humans didn't have, ruling human populations on behalf of a heritage they carried. The survivor's interpretation. This is the one that seems most consistent with the physical evidence. The Shemsu Hor were survivors of an earlier civilization, a civilization that existed before the cataclysm that destroyed the ancient world. A catastrophe we've already explored. The Younger Dryas event, 12,800 years ago. The cosmic impact, the floods, the climatic collapse. If an advanced civilization existed before that catastrophe, and the evidence suggests it did, it was destroyed, almost completely. But survivors escaped, with the knowledge they had, with the skills they've developed. They arrived in Egypt, gradually established governance, taught the natives, and generation after generation, transmitted what they knew, for 13,120 years according to the Egyptian texts. Now, which of these three interpretations best explains what we're about to see with the granite boxes? Let's find out. The Serapeum of Saqqara was rediscovered in 1850. Auguste Mariette, a French archaeologist, was following a clue 1,800 years old. The Greek geographer Strabo had described the site around 24 BC, an avenue of sphinxes leading to a buried temple. Mariette found the avenue, followed it, and found the entrance to the tunnels. What he saw inside impressed him deeply, and also confused him. Enormous tunnels carved into limestone rock, side niches the size of large rooms, and in each niche, a colossal granite box. Mariette, drawing on the Egyptian tradition of the Apis bulls, sacred bulls that were mummified and buried with pharaonic honors, concluded these were the funerary chambers for the bulls. That explanation became canonical. It's what tourist guides say to this day, but the more you examine the evidence, the less the explanation holds up. Problem number 1. The boxes were empty. Mariette opened several that were sealed with original cement. Empty. No bull mummies, no bones, no mummification wrappings, no canopic jars that normally accompany Egyptian mummies. 1 or 2 boxes had remains, but subsequent analysis strongly suggested those remains were later additions, not original. If these were funerary chambers for sacred bulls, where are the bulls? Problem number 2, the inscriptions. Most boxes have no original inscriptions. This is extraordinary for any Egyptian object of ritual importance. The Egyptians covered everything with sacred inscriptions. Some boxes do have hieroglyphs, but specialists noticed something disturbing about them. They are poorly positioned, poorly executed. The style is inconsistent with the quality of the work on the box itself. It's as if someone wrote on something that already existed, as if the inscriptions were late additions to much older objects. Additions made by people who didn't quite know what they were inscribing. This raises a possibility that official archaeology resists admitting. The boxes are older than the inscriptions. The dynastic Egyptians didn't create them, they found them, and tried to give them a purpose that made sense within their world. Problem number 3, the technology. This is the most disturbing of all. Engineer and researcher Christopher Dunn spent years analyzing the surfaces of the Serapeum boxes with modern measurement instruments. What he found completely defies conventional explanation. The interior surfaces of the boxes are flat, within tolerances of fractions of a millimeter. For a surface area of that size, 2 meters by 4 meters of depth. That level of flatness is extraordinarily difficult to achieve even with modern machinery. The internal corners are perfectly square. Perfect. Not almost perfect, or impressively good for the era. Perfect. And there is evidence of mechanical cutting. Saw marks. Marks indicating a tool rotating at high speed, not a hand-struck chisel. To cut granite with that level of precision using a saw, you need diamond-tipped blades, or equivalently hard material, or some form of high-energy cutting technology we don't know about. The Egyptians had copper and bronze tools. Copper has a hardness of 3 on the Mohs scale. Granite has a hardness between 6 and 7. You cannot cut granite with copper. It is physically impossible. The copper will wear away before making any significant scratch on the granite. So how were these boxes made? The honest answer is, we don't know. And that is exactly the answer that opens the next question. But the manufacturing precision isn't the only problem. There's the transportation. The granite used in the Serapeum boxes came from Aswan, a city in southern Egypt, on the banks of the Nile. Aswan is 800 kilometers from Saqqara, 500 miles, with boxes weighing 70 tons each. More than 24 known boxes, probably many more not yet discovered. That means someone moved over 1,680 tons of granite, at least 800 kilometers, and then introduced these boxes into underground tunnels with centimeters of clearance. Let's think about the tunnel geometry for a moment. The tunnels of the Serapeum are relatively narrow. At some points, the boxes pass through with less than 30 centimeters of clearance on each side. There's no space for wide ramps, no space for multiple teams working with levers. The physical space simply doesn't allow the methods conventional explanation proposes. And there's more. Some boxes were installed in niches that sit at an angle to the main tunnel. They couldn't be slid in directly. They had to be rotated with precision while being moved. Rotating 70 tons of granite in confined space, without cranes, without heavy machinery, without even the wheel, which the Egyptians didn't use for heavy transport in this period. The official explanation talks of sand ramps, plant fiber ropes, and large numbers of workers. But modern engineers who calculated the logistics have all reached the same conclusion. The proposed methods don't work within the tunnel geometry. You simply don't have the physical space to apply sufficient force with ropes and levers at the necessary points. Something is wrong with the story. Either the methods were different from what we imagine, or there was technology we've lost, or, and this is the possibility that connects everything, there were builders with knowledge the dynastic Egyptians didn't have. The Shemsu Hor didn't disappear when the pharaohs took power. This is a crucial point that most people miss. When the historical dynasty of Egypt began with Narmer around 3100 BC, it didn't erase what existed before. It absorbed it. The Shemsu Hor became the priestly elite of Egypt, the guardians of sacred knowledge, the true holders of power behind the thrones. Egyptian priests were famous in the ancient world for their extraordinary knowledge. When the Greeks visited Egypt, and many of the greatest Greek philosophers went to Egypt deliberately to learn, they were impressed. Pythagoras spent years studying with Egyptian priests. He returned to Greece with mathematical theorems and philosophical concepts that transformed Western thought. Plato visited Egypt. The concept of Atlantis, which he describes in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he explicitly says he heard from Egyptian priests who kept records of events that occurred 9,000 years before his era. Herodotus, the father of history, visited Egypt and was amazed by what the priests knew. All of them reported the same thing. Egyptian priests guarded knowledge thousands of years old. Knowledge, they said, came from the Shemsu Hor, and Egyptian temples had an elaborate system of initiation. There were levels. Each level revealed more of the guarded knowledge. Common initiates received external knowledge, the myths, the rituals, the public ceremonies. Advanced initiates received internal knowledge, sacred mathematics, advanced astronomy, understanding of natural forces. And at the top, the mysteries of Osiris, the deepest, oldest, most carefully guarded knowledge. Knowledge, they said, came directly from the original builders, from the Shemsu Hor. Now compare this with what was happening in Sumer on the other side of the world. In Sumer, the texts speak of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven came down, divine beings who established the first cities, taught humans, and then withdrew. But before withdrawing, they left intermediaries, priest kings with special lineage, guardians of divine knowledge. In Egypt, Shemsu Hor. In Sumer, priests of the Anunnaki. The same pattern, different continents, cultures with no known direct contact. How is this possible, unless the source was the same? 12,800 years ago, something terrible happened to Earth. We call it the Younger Dryas event. We've explored this event in detail in another week. One or more cosmic fragments struck Earth. Massive fires swept continents. Temperatures plummeted within decades. Glaciers advanced. Oceans rose more than 100 meters. Entire species went extinct. Human populations were decimated. What existed before was destroyed. Almost completely, but not completely. Survivors escaped, carrying what they could, the knowledge they had, the skills they'd developed, and they went to different parts of the world. In Egypt, they arrived as the Shemsu Hor. In Sumer, they arrived as the instructors of the Anunnaki. In Ireland, they arrived as the Tuatha De Danann, the peoples of the goddess Danu, who according to Irish myths came from islands in the north that sank. In the Americas, they arrived as Viracocha in the Andes, as Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, as light-skinned, bearded figures who taught civilization where before there were only tribes. Different names in cultures that never had contact with each other, but surprisingly similar descriptions. And all of them appear shortly after the Younger Dryas. All of them bring advanced knowledge in what seems like a sudden burst. All of them build impossible monuments, and all of them, eventually, disappear or transform into mythical figures in the traditions they left behind. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the 12,000-year-old monumental complex, is perhaps the most famous example, built by hunter-gatherers, according to conventional explanation. Hunter-gatherers who suddenly, with no apparent transition, knew how to organize thousands of workers, cut 20-ton stones, create animal sculptures with extraordinary detail, and build an elaborate architectural complex, and then deliberately buried it, covered it with earth on purpose, as if they wanted to preserve it, or hide it. The Serapeum may be the Egyptian version of the same phenomenon, built by the survivors, the Shemsu Hor, for a purpose we partially understand or don't understand at all, and then found by the dynastic Egyptians, who did what humans always do when they find something they don't comprehend. They gave it a name, a use, an explanation that fit their world, sacred bulls. But the boxes remain, with their impossible precision, with their polished surfaces, with their mystery intact. Anyone can visit them today, can place their hand on the stone, can feel the smoothness that shouldn't exist, and ask, how? Let's return to the question we started with. If the dynastic Egyptians didn't make the granite boxes, who did? And did the Egyptians themselves know the answer? The answer to the second question is yes. They knew. They called them Shemsu Hor, recorded their reigns, wrote their story in the Turin Papyrus, carved the history into the Palermo stone, 13,420 years of rulers with knowledge the pharaohs didn't have. The pharaohs inherited Egypt from the Shemsu Hor, inherited the temples, the structures, the writing system, the knowledge preserved by the priests, and they inherited the granite boxes without fully knowing what they were originally for. So they did what any civilization does when it inherits something it doesn't completely understand. They gave it a new purpose, sacred bulls, which made sense to them, which fit their religious worldview, but the original purpose lost. The knowledge the Shemsu Hor had to build these boxes, lost. The technology that allowed moving 70 tons through narrow tunnels, lost or hidden. Because in the next episode, I'm going to show you that it may not be completely lost. The pyramids of Giza, the most famous monuments in the world, may still be functioning, may still be doing what they were built to do, not as tombs, as machines. In 2018, scientists published a study confirming that the Great Pyramid concentrates electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers. It functions like an antenna, and no one in conventional archaeology wants to talk about it. The pattern of the Shemsu Hor is not unique to Egypt. In Sumer, the texts speak of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven came down, divine rulers who established the first cities. They taught humans, then withdrew, but left intermediaries, priest kings with special lineage. In Egypt, the Shemsu Hor. In Sumer, the priests of Enki and Enlil.
His favor
in
is
Ireland,
upon you.
the Tuatha de Danann. In the Americas, Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl, the same pattern all over the world. At the same time, after the Younger Dryas, as if the same civilization had sent survivors to every corner of the world, to rebuild, to preserve, to teach. In Egypt, they called them the Shemsu Hor, and they made the granite boxes.
Hold fast! Steer
But the
towards
boxes
the
are
light.
just the beginning.
We must survive
The
this
pyramids
flood.
are the greater proof. No mummy has ever been found in the pyramids of Giza. That is not alternative theory. That is not speculation. It is documented archaeological fact. In over 200 years of intensive excavation and study of the three pyramids of Giza, the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafra, and the Pyramid of Menkaure, not a single royal mummy has ever been found. No funerary inscriptions were found inside the Great Pyramid. The pyramid texts, the prayers and magic formulas that appear in every other Egyptian pyramid, simply don't exist inside the Great Pyramid. It is virtually uninscribed on the interior. No canopic jars to hold mummified organs, no protective amulets, no ushabti figurines that should accompany the dead, no treasures that Egyptians buried with their kings. The Great Pyramid has none of the defining characteristics of an Egyptian tomb. And in 2018, physicists from 2 European universities published a peer-reviewed scientific study that confirmed something extraordinary. The Great Pyramid concentrates electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers. It functions like an antenna, like an energy resonator. This didn't come from a conspiracy blog. It was published in a scientific journal, with methodology, calculations, and peer review. So the question is simple and direct. Why would anyone build a tomb that functions as an energy antenna? The answer that conventional archaeology avoids giving is the most obvious one. Because it was never a tomb. Stay until the end. Because we're going to dismantle the biggest assumption in modern archaeology, block by block, chamber by chamber. Let's analyze the Great Pyramid as engineers, not as tourists dazzled by its size. If you were designing a tomb for the most powerful man in the world, what would it look like? Accessible, decorated with the name and achievements of the deceased. with space for all the objects he'd take into eternity, with corridors priests could use for rituals. The Great Pyramid is the opposite of that in almost every respect. Let's examine each internal element from the bottom up. The subterranean chamber. It sits carved directly into the bedrock below the pyramid. It appears unfinished. The walls are rough, unlined, undecorated. The conventional explanation: it was Khufu's original plan, then abandoned. He changed his mind and decided to build the chambers higher up. But pharaohs didn't change their minds mid-construction on their own tombs. The project was planned years in advance. Every detail was decided before the first stone was placed. A more coherent alternative explanation: the subterranean chamber was never meant to be finished. It had a technical function, perhaps related to capturing geothermal or vibrational energy from the bedrock below. The Queen's Chamber. Despite the name given by medieval Arabs, there is no evidence it ever housed a queen or any person. It sits at the geometric center of the pyramid. The strangest detail is the air shafts. The Queen's Chamber has two shafts rising at an angle, to the north and to the south. But they don't reach the exterior of the pyramid. Air shafts that ventilate nothing. For a tomb, this makes no sense. A mummy doesn't need fresh air. But for a machine, ducts that direct airflow or energy at specific angles make complete sense. And these shafts point toward specific stars, toward Orion's belt to the south, toward the North Star to the north. The Grand Gallery. This is the most impressive of the internal structures. 47 meters long, 8.5 meters high. The walls rise in steps, creating a stepped cross-section. Anyone who enters the Grand Gallery immediately notices that the acoustics are extraordinary. Sounds propagate in specific ways. Certain frequencies are amplified. Acoustic researchers have measured it. The Grand Gallery amplifies sounds in the low-frequency range with impressive precision. It functions like a giant organ pipe, but precisely tuned. Why would a tomb need acoustics? A mummy doesn't listen to music. For a machine that manipulates sound frequencies, acoustics is the central component. The King's Chamber. Here sits the most technically interesting element of the entire pyramid. The chamber is completely lined with granite from Aswan, the same hard red stone as the boxes in the Serapeum we saw in episode 1. The granite wasn't chosen for aesthetic reasons. Egypt has limestone in abundance, a far easier material to work with. Using granite, which had to be transported 800 kilometers, was a deliberate and costly choice. Why? Because granite contains quartz, and quartz has a fundamental physical property called piezoelectricity. When you compress or bend quartz crystals, they generate an electrical voltage, and when you apply an electrical voltage to them, they vibrate. This is the same principle used in microphones, submarine sonar, and medical ultrasound equipment. Granite packed with quartz, under constant pressure and vibration, generates electricity. Above the King's Chamber, there are 5 relieving chambers, cavities stacked one above another. The conventional explanation is that they distribute the weight of the pyramid above. But the Queen's Chamber directly below has no relieving chambers and has never collapsed in 4,500 years. The weight is distributed by the angles of the pyramid itself, not by chambers. The relieving chambers serve another function, possibly acoustic, possibly to create specific pressure on the granite below. The sarcophagus. A granite box in the King's Chamber. No lid. The lid was never found. No inscriptions, no mummy, no evidence of funerary use. And it's larger than the entrance to the chamber. This means it was placed there during construction, not afterward. It was part of the original design. If it was a sarcophagus, why is there nowhere to put a lid? Why are there no inscriptions with the name of the pharaoh supposedly to be buried there? The complete structure of the Great Pyramid, from the subterranean level to the apex, makes sense as a machine. It makes no sense as a tomb. In 2018, 2 research groups published a study in the Journal of Applied Physics. This is not a fringe publication. The Journal of Applied Physics is one of the most respected scientific publications in the world in the field of applied physics. The researchers were from ITMO University in St. Petersburg, Russia, and from the Laserzentrum Hanover in Germany. The title of the study, Investigation of the Great Pyramid of Giza as a Resonator of Electromagnetic Energy. They created a precise computational model of the Great Pyramid, geometry, materials, proportions, and simulated how electromagnetic waves interact with this structure. What they discovered was surprising. When electromagnetic waves in the wavelength range of 200 to 600 meters interact with the pyramid, the structure concentrates them in two specific places: the internal chambers, specifically the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber, and the base, the foundation of the pyramid. The intensity of the electromagnetic field in these regions is significantly greater than it would be without the pyramidal structure. In plain language, the pyramid takes electromagnetic energy from the surrounding environment and focuses it at specific points in its interior. It works like an antenna, like a resonator. The researchers were careful in their conclusions. They explicitly stated they were not claiming the pyramid was intentionally designed for this function. They were only describing what they physically observed, but what they observed is real and verifiable. Now combine this with independent acoustic studies. Acoustic researchers who studied the King's Chamber measured its resonant frequency at 121 Hz, close to the musical note F sharp. The granite sarcophagus resonates at 117 Hz. Slightly different. When two objects vibrate at very close frequencies, they create a phenomenon called a beat frequency, a pulse equal to the difference between the two frequencies. In this case, a pulse of 4 Hz falls in the delta range of brain waves, the state of deep sleep and, according to some research, altered states of consciousness. Was this intentionally designed? Was the pyramid built to induce specific states of consciousness in those who entered? I can't answer that with certainty, but I can say that no Egyptian tomb architect showed this acoustic care in any other sarcophagus or funerary chamber in Egypt. This is unique, deliberate, and unexplained. Mechanical engineer Christopher Dunn spent decades studying the Great Pyramid, not as an archaeologist, as an engineer, with eyes trained to identify systems, components, and mechanical functions. His conclusions were published in detail in the book The Giza Power Plant in 1998, and no academic debater has been able to satisfactorily refute his technical analysis. Dunn's hypothesis: the Great Pyramid was an acoustic and electromagnetic energy plant. Here's how the system would have worked, component by component. Step 1. The vibration source. The Great Pyramid is built on a limestone plateau. Beneath that plateau are aquifers, pockets of groundwater that flow and move continuously. Water moving through rock cavities generates vibration. It generates infrasound, frequencies below what the human ear detects, but which the physical body feels. This infrasound rises through the rock and enters the pyramid structure. Step 2. The amplification. The Grand Gallery, with its extraordinary acoustics and stepped walls, functions as an amplifier for specific frequencies. Dunn proposes that the niches in the walls of the Grand Gallery contained Helmholtz resonators, devices that amplify specific frequencies, like the sound you hear when blowing across the top of an empty bottle. These resonators would tune and amplify the vibrations coming from below, creating a precise resonance field. Step 3. The piezoelectric conversion. The granite in the King's Chamber, packed with quartz crystals, was subjected to this amplified vibration field. Quartz crystals under vibration generate electricity. The more crystals, the more electricity. The more intense the vibration, the more energy generated. Aswan granite has a high concentration of quartz, between 20% and 30% of its mineral composition. It was deliberately chosen for this property, not just for durability. Step 4. The transmission. The Great Pyramid originally had a complete external casing of Tura limestone, a white, extremely polished limestone. So polished it shone in the sun like metal. Limestone is a good electrical insulator. The pyramid with its casing would have been like a giant capacitor, generating and storing electrical charge in the conductive granite structure inside, insulated by the limestone outside. The pyramidion, the apex stone, now disappeared, may have been made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver that is an excellent conductor. A terminal output for the energy being generated. The casing was removed over the centuries to build Cairo. The pyramidion disappeared at some point in history. The power plant was dismantled piece by people who didn't know what they were doing. What remains is the skeleton of the system. But even the skeleton still concentrates electromagnetic energy, as the 2018 study confirmed. Crazy? Maybe. But it explains the internal structure of the pyramid better than elaborate tomb for a pharaoh who was never found there. If the Great Pyramid was a machine, there was a manual. Someone knew how to build it, knew how to operate it, knew what it was for. Where is that knowledge? To answer that, we need to talk about Thoth. In the Egyptian pantheon, Thoth is unique, different from all the other gods. Ra was the sun god. Osiris was the god of the dead. Horus was the sky god. Isis was the goddess of magic. All of them had specific domains of the natural or supernatural world. Thoth was the god of knowledge itself as an absolute concept. Thoth invented hieroglyphic writing, at least that's what the Egyptian texts say. He created the system by which knowledge could be recorded and preserved. Thoth invented mathematics, geometry, astronomy, medicine. Thoth was the scribe of the gods, meaning he recorded everything. In any divine meeting, Thoth was present, documenting. The Greeks, when they encountered Thoth, immediately identified him with Hermes, their own god of knowledge and communication. They called him Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes 3 times great. The entire Western Hermetic tradition, medieval alchemy, Renaissance magic, philosophical Hermeticism, claims to derive from the knowledge of Thoth Hermes. But who was Thoth really? The Egyptian texts describe him as having existed before the dynasties, as being one of the first, not born of other gods, but simply existing from the beginning. Some Egyptian traditions say Thoth came from a distant land. He brought the knowledge of a civilization that had been destroyed. He established himself in Egypt and taught. Does that sound familiar? It's the same pattern as the Shemsu Hor from episode 1. Thoth may have been one of the Shemsu Hor, or perhaps the most important of them, the central guardian of technical knowledge. And before departing, before withdrawing from public life, whatever that means concretely, he stored the most important knowledge, so it wouldn't be lost again. He stored it beneath the Sphinx, in the Hall of Records. The Hall of Records is not just an esoteric legend. There are references to secret chambers in Giza in ancient Egyptian texts. The Book of Thoth, a text that supposedly contains supreme knowledge, is described as being hidden somewhere in the Giza area. The medieval Arab tradition, which preceded modern archaeology, consistently speaks of chambers and treasures beneath the pyramids and the Sphinx. And Edgar Cayce, the American sleeping prophet who made hundreds of documented psychic readings in the 1930s and 1940s, specifically described a chamber beneath the front paws of the Sphinx, containing records of Atlantis, containing the true history of humanity's origins. Cayce made this statement decades before any scanning technology existed to verify it. In 1991, researchers used seismic equipment around the Sphinx. Robert Schoch, Yale geologist, and Thomas Dobecki, geophysicist, conducted the study. They found clearly defined anomalies beneath the Sphinx, a rectangular cavity beneath the front paws, with dimensions of approximately 12 meters long by 9 meters wide. Not natural, with defined edges, a chamber. In 1996, researchers from Florida State University repeated the experiment with different technology, ground-penetrating radar. They obtained similar results: chambers, defined structures beneath the Sphinx. 2 independent studies, different methodologies. Same conclusion. There is something constructed beneath the Sphinx. The Egyptian government, which controlled access to Giza, became very interested in these findings, and then shut everything down. Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities for many years, took full control of research at Giza. Excavation requests were denied. Independent researchers were prevented from conducting studies in the area. Hawass publicly declared that the anomalies were natural, that there was nothing significant beneath the Sphinx. But here's the logical problem with that statement. To know there's nothing significant in a place, you need to have investigated that place. Need to have opened it, excavated it, examined it. The Egyptian government didn't open it, didn't excavate it, didn't examine it. They simply declared there was nothing there and blocked any attempt to verify. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, using muons, subatomic particles that penetrate any material and allow photographing the interior of massive structures, found an enormous void inside the Great Pyramid. 30 meters long, completely sealed, no known entrance. In 2023, a team found a hidden corridor just behind the main entrance of the pyramid, also sealed, also with no obvious purpose according to conventional archaeology. Every technological advance we manage to apply to Giza reveals something new hidden, and every time full access is limited, controlled, or denied. Why? That is the most honest question I can ask. There's one last element I can't leave out. The Great Pyramid's position is not random. If you divide Earth's surface into quadrants, separating continental landmass from ocean, the geometric center of those landmasses falls exactly at Giza. The probability of this being accidental is astronomically small. The latitude of the Great Pyramid is 29.9792458 degrees north. The speed of light in a vacuum is 299,792,458 meters per second. The same digits, rearranged but the same. Could this be coincidence? Maybe. But if it is, it's of an order that should make us pause. The pyramid's astronomical alignments are extraordinarily precise. It is aligned to true north with an error of only 3/60 of 1 degree, more precise than the Greenwich Observatory, built with 17th century modern technology. The shafts in the King's Chamber point toward Orion to the south and toward the North Star to the north, but calculated for the positions of those stars 10,500 years ago. Not today. Not today. 10,500 years ago. Why point to where the stars were 10,500 years ago? Because that's when the pyramid was designed, or when it was built, and the three Giza pyramids together replicate the pattern of Orion's belt, the three central stars of the constellation, also calculated for 10,500 BC. The builders left a date coded in the stars, a date far earlier than Egypt's conventional history, a date that coincides with the end of the Younger Dryas, the cataclysm we discussed in the Lost Civilizations Week, a date that says, this is where everything began again. Let's return to the question we started with. If the pyramids never held mummies, what were they built for? Modern science is telling us they concentrated energy. The internal structure suggests they converted vibration into electricity. The acoustics confirm they were designed to manipulate frequencies. The position and alignments show they were built by someone who knew the earth and sky with a precision that shouldn't have existed at that time. And where is the manual? Possibly beneath the Sphinx, in chambers we detected in 1996 with scientific instruments, and that we were never allowed to open. It may be that there's nothing there. It may be that the chambers are empty, or contain only natural rock. But the other possibility exists, and as long as access is denied, that possibility remains open. If it exists, and the 1996 scans suggest it does, what's inside? According to Egyptian and Hermetic traditions, the records of origin, the true story of how humans came to Earth, who the Neteru were, what they did, the technical knowledge, how to build the pyramids, how to generate energy, advanced medicine, precise astronomy, the same knowledge that Egypt's priests preserved in complete form, the prophecies, cosmic cycles. What comes next? Thoth supposedly knew the past and the future because he understood astronomical cycles. The Book of Thoth, the supreme text, which, according to legend, contains power over reality. That gives understanding of the fundamental principles of the universe. Legend, probably yes, in its literal form. But a legend doesn't arise from nothing, and the chambers detected in 1996 are real. If there are chambers, and there are, what are they guarding? And why can nobody enter? Perhaps the answer lies in the most visible structure at Giza, which after all is not what it seems. Look at the Sphinx, not at the face, at the body. See those marks in the stone, those vertical grooves running down the body as if water had been poured over it for centuries? That erosion was not made by sand and wind. If it was sand and wind, the marks would be horizontal. They would show a pattern of exfoliation, layers gradually removed by friction. The marks on the Sphinx are vertical, undulating, deep. Characteristic of a single agent, water. A lot of water, over a very long time. The problem is that Egypt hasn't had heavy rainfall for at least 7,000 years. When the Sahara was green, between 10,000 and 5,000 BC, there was enough precipitation to cause this erosion. Then the climate changed. The desert advanced. Heavy rains ceased to exist in the region. If the erosion is from water, the Sphinx was carved when Egypt still had heavy rains. That places the Sphinx at minimum 5,000 BC, probably before 7,000 BC, possibly before 10,000 BC, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years before Khafra, the pharaoh to whom official history attributes the construction. But wait, there's more. Look now at the head. It's too small for the body, completely disproportionate. This isn't an artistic error. Egyptians didn't make mistakes like this on monuments of this scale. The head is not original. Someone recarved the head of a much older monument, erased what was there, put something else. What was there before? Why did they erase it? And why in 2024, with all the technology we have, do we still not have permission to excavate beneath the front paws of the Sphinx, where chambers were detected in 1996? In 1990, a geologist made a decision that would change the debate about ancient Egypt. Robert Schoch, holding a PhD in geology from Yale University, one of the most respected in the world, decided to examine the Sphinx not as an archaeologist, but as a geologist. He wasn't interested in who built it according to historical texts. He was interested in what the rock said, and rock doesn't lie. Schoch spent weeks methodically examining the erosion on the body of the Sphinx and on the walls of the enclosure carved around it. What he observed was clear to any trained geologist. The erosion on the body of the Sphinx has a hydraulic pattern caused by precipitation. The vertical, undulating, deep grooves running down the body like stone curtains worn away are a textbook pattern of erosion from intense rainfall over a prolonged period. Compare this with the erosion visible on the sides of the pyramids, which are approximately the same age as the conventional dating of the Sphinx. On the pyramids, the erosion is horizontal, exfoliating from the impact of sand carried by the wind. Completely different. Two monuments in the same geographic region. Two completely distinct erosion patterns. The difference has only one explanation. The Sphinx is much older than the pyramids. It was exposed to a climate the pyramids never knew. Schoch calculated how long would be needed to produce the level of erosion he observed using historical climate data for the region. The conclusion, the Sphinx would need to have been exposed to heavy rains for at least 1,500 to 2,000 years. And that period of heavy rains ended in Egypt around 5,000 BC, or more likely 7,000 BC. This places the construction of the Sphinx between 7,000 and 5,000 BC at minimum, possibly before 10,000 BC. Schoch presented his discovery in 1991 at the annual conference of the Geological Society of America, the leading geological society in the United States. The geologists present examined the methodology, examined the data, and for the most part agreed. The erosion pattern was consistent with hydraulic erosion. The analysis was geologically sound. But Egyptologists had a completely different reaction. Dr. Zahi Hawass, who would be for decades the most powerful figure in Egyptian archaeology, publicly attacked the theory with a line of reasoning that reveals more about the state of conventional archaeology than about Schoch's theory. Hawass essentially said, the Sphinx cannot be older because there was no advanced civilization before 3100 BC. Do you see the problem in that argument? It's saying, the geological evidence is wrong because it contradicts what we already believe. That's the opposite of the scientific method. The scientific method says, If the evidence contradicts what we believe, perhaps what we believe is wrong. The rock didn't read the archaeology books. It is what it is. Now let's talk about the head, because this is where the story gets even stranger. Anyone who sees the Sphinx in person, or even in photographs with good perspective, immediately notices that something is wrong with the proportions. The body is enormous, robust, powerful. The head is too small, visibly smaller than it should be for the body size. This isn't a matter of artistic taste or style, it's a matter of mathematical proportion. The Egyptians were obsessive about proportions. They had strict artistic canons that defined exactly how each element of the human or animal body should relate to the others. These canons were maintained with extraordinary consistency over millennia. Egypt has hundreds of sphinxes. Sphinxes of granite, limestone, sandstone, all sizes. Sphinxes from the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, all have correct proportions. The head is appropriate for the body in every other sphinx, except the Great Sphinx of Giza. Why would this one, of all of them, be the only one with such a marked disproportion? The most coherent explanation is also the most disturbing. The head was recarved. The original Sphinx had a different, larger head, possibly a lion's head, compatible with the feline body of the monument. At some point, a pharaoh decided to use the existing head as material to carve his own face there. But in recarving the original head, which was probably much larger, the inevitable result was a smaller head. You can't add stone, you can only remove it. This explains the disproportion. It also explains why the head is significantly less eroded than the body, because it's newer. It was recarved much later after the body was built. Which pharaoh did this? There are main candidates. Thutmose IV, who had the dream stele written between the paws of the Sphinx, describing how the monument appeared to him in a dream and asked to be uncovered. The story conveniently makes Thutmose a guardian of the Sphinx, the type of narrative a pharaoh who modified the monument would create to legitimize his connection to it. The face currently on the Sphinx doesn't precisely match any identified pharaoh. Forensic reconstructions made with the facial features of the Sphinx show a face different from known representations of Khafra. If Khafra built the Sphinx, as official history claims, why isn't the face recognizably his? Because the head is not Khafra's. It belongs to another pharaoh in another period who recarved the face of a much older monument. The Sphinx faces east, toward the exact point where the sun rises on the equinox. This is not an accident. It's a deliberate and precise choice. But the orientation has a deeper layer that is rarely explained. There is an astronomical phenomenon called the precession of the equinoxes. Due to the tilt and slow movement of Earth's axis, the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the equinox changes slowly over millennia. This complete cycle takes approximately 26,000 years, and associated with this movement, the constellation that appears on the eastern horizon at the exact moment of the equinox sunrise also changes, what astronomers call the ascending constellation, or age sign. Today, the constellation rising on the horizon at the spring equinox is Pisces. That's why we live in the age of Pisces. 2,000 years ago, it was Aries. 4,500 years ago, at the time of Khafra, it was Taurus. The Sphinx is not a bull. The Sphinx is a lion. The age of Leo, the period when the constellation Leo rose on the horizon at the spring equinox, was between approximately 10,170 and 8,110 BC. If the Sphinx was built to face its own constellation rising on the horizon, it was built in the age of Leo, more than 10,000 years ago. This argument was developed independently by researchers Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock in the 1990s. Bauval had previously discovered that the three Giza pyramids replicate the pattern of Orion's belt, and calculated that the alignment corresponds to the position of Orion in 10,500 BC, not its current position. The position in 10,500 BC. The Sphinx facing Leo at the equinox. The pyramids aligned with Orion from 10,500 BC. The builders left a date coded into the Giza plateau itself. A date, a message. This was built here, at this moment. Remember, 10,500 BC. This is exactly the period coinciding with the end of the Younger Dryas event, the catastrophe that destroyed the previous civilization we explored in the Lost Civilizations Week. As if the survivors of that catastrophe built a monument saying, "We existed. We survived the end of the world. And we want you to know when." In 1991, Robert Schoch and geophysicist Thomas Debicki did something simple but revealing. They placed seismic equipment around the Sphinx and measured how sound waves propagated through the rock below. Sound waves behave differently depending on what they encounter. They pass through solid rock one way, through empty cavities another. This difference is detectable and measurable. The results were clear. Beneath the front paws of the Sphinx, there is a cavity with a clearly defined rectangular shape, approximately 12 meters long by 9 meters wide. It's not a natural fissure in the rock. Natural fissures don't have rectangular shapes with defined edges. It's a built chamber. In 1996, researchers from Florida State University repeated the experiment with different technology, ground-penetrating radar. They obtained similar results. Chambers, defined structures beneath the Sphinx. Two independent studies, different methodologies, same conclusion. There is something constructed beneath the Sphinx. The Egyptian government, which controlled access to Giza, became very interested in these discoveries, and then blocked all further investigation. Zahi Hawass publicly stated there was nothing significant, that the anomalies were natural. But observe the logical problem in that statement. To know there's nothing significant in a place, you need to have investigated that place, need to have opened it, excavated it, examined it. The Egyptian government didn't open it, didn't excavate, didn't examine. They simply declared there was nothing there and blocked any attempt to verify. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, using muons, subatomic particles that penetrate any material and allow photographing the interior of massive structures, found an enormous void inside the Great Pyramid. 30 meters long, completely sealed. No known entrance. In 2023, a team found a hidden corridor just behind the pyramid's main entrance, also sealed. Also with no obvious purpose according to conventional archaeology. Every technological advance we manage to apply to Giza reveals something new hidden inside. And every time, access is limited, controlled, or denied. Why? That is the most honest question I can ask. I want to be fair to academia here. It's not composed of malicious conspirators trying to hide the truth. Conventional archaeology has genuine reasons to resist the conclusions we're discussing. The first reason is epistemological. Science works on the basis of accumulated evidence and consensus. Changing the consensus requires extraordinary evidence. The Sphinx is older is an extraordinary claim, and it requires precisely extraordinary evidence. Schoch's geological analysis is good, but not irrefutable. There are geologists who argue the erosion may have alternative explanations, local microclimate, salt, other factors. The second reason is institutional. Decades of careers have been built on the conventional chronology of Egypt. Admitting it's fundamentally wrong means admitting that thousands of hours of study, dozens of publications, and an entire intellectual framework need to be revisited. That is humanly difficult. It's not dishonesty. It's normal human psychology, but, and this is the crucial point, these reasons explain the resistance. They don't justify it. Science should not resist investigation. It should promote it. If there are chambers detected beneath the Sphinx, the correct scientific response is, let's open it and see what's there. Not, we declare there's nothing there and block any attempt to verify. The first response is science. The second is something else. Schoch continues his research to this day. He has published new studies, collected more data. His position hasn't changed, and the evidence he presents remains without satisfactory geological refutation. The Sphinx erosion is real. Anyone can see it with their own eyes. And what it says is simple. This monument is older than official history admits. If the Sphinx is more than 10,000 years old, who built it? It wasn't the dynastic Egyptians. They barely existed yet. In episodes 1 and 2, we talked about the Shemsu Hor, the pre-dynastic rulers that the Turin Papyrus records as having reigned for 13,120 years before the pharaohs. If they existed, and the Egyptian texts say they did, the Sphinx fits perfectly into the time when they would have existed. Were they capable of a monument of this scale? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey shows us yes. At 12,000 years old, this monumental complex was built at a time archaeology said was impossible. And yet there it stands. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe had social organization, technical knowledge, and execution capability that contradicts the primitive hunter-gatherers model. The same builders, or builders of the same level of development, may have constructed the Sphinx in the same period. And the Sphinx matters for a reason that goes beyond archaeology. If it is older, the entire chronology of Egypt needs to be revised. If the entire chronology of Egypt needs to be revised, what else is wrong? The Sphinx is the pin that, if removed, could reorganize the entire puzzle. That's why it's so protected, so controlled, so surrounded by silence, not because there's an organized conspiracy to hide the truth, but because the truth it carries is too large to be easily processed. The Sphinx looks toward the horizon, toward where Leo rose, more than 10,000 years ago. Built by hands that official history doesn't recognize, with a head that isn't original, recarved by a pharaoh who wanted to claim what he didn't build. With chambers beneath that, we detected and never opened. With erosion in the stone that tells a different story from the official one. Before we close, I want to be honest with you. I don't know everything, nobody does. What I've presented in this documentary is evidence and the questions that evidence raises. Robert Schoch's geological analysis is methodologically sound. Peer-reviewed geologists found it credible in 1991, and nothing has emerged since to change that assessment. The 2018 study on the electromagnetic properties of the Great Pyramid is published, peer-reviewed, and reproducible. The chambers detected beneath the Sphinx in 1991 and 1996 are documented in published research by credentialed scientists from major universities. The Turin Papyrus exists. It's in the museum in Turin. The 13,420-year figure is there, in the text. These are not inventions. These are facts that the official narrative prefers to minimize. The questions these facts raise are legitimate. How were the granite boxes of the Serapeum manufactured and moved? Why does the Sphinx show hydraulic erosion in a region that hasn't had heavy rain for at least 7,000 years? What is in the sealed chambers beneath the Sphinx and above the Grand Gallery? Who were the Shemsu Hor? And why did Egyptian scribes record 13,420 years of their rule in a historical document? Why does the Great Pyramid concentrate electromagnetic energy in its chambers? These questions deserve serious investigation, not silence, not dismissal. It struggles to explain why flood myths appear in virtually every ancient culture. Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, the Americas, Polynesia, all describing a global catastrophe that destroyed an earlier world. It struggles to explain the precision manufacturing of the Serapeum boxes, or the perfect construction at Kumapunku, or the 1,000-ton stones of Baalbek. A simpler explanation, one that fits more of the evidence, is that there was a source, not in the pharaohs, not in the dynasties, in the Shemsu Hor, in the Serapeum, in the Sphinx, in the sealed chambers we haven't opened. The Sphinx looks toward the horizon. It has looked there for more than 10,000 years, if the geology is right, built by hands that official history doesn't acknowledge, carrying a face that isn't original, recarved by a pharaoh claiming what he didn't create, sitting above chambers we've detected and never opened, aligned with constellations from a time before recorded history. The Shemsu Hor were real. The Egyptians told us so. The granite boxes are impossible. Physics tells us so. The pyramids concentrate energy. Published science tells us so. The Sphinx is older. Geology tells us so. The chambers exist. Seismic and radar studies tell us so. What are we waiting for? Permission? The answer exists. And one day, we will find it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this documentary changed the way you see Egypt, share it. Someone you know needs to see this. Subscribe for next week because there is so much more to discover.